I cannot conceive of the mindset that has created this.
It's the secrecy that is astonishing.
This is sinister stuff.
The former PM's explanation? You just had to be there.
I think sometimes we forget what was happening 2 years ago. We were dealing with quite extraordinary circumstances.
That in response to revelations Morrison was secretly sworn in as Finance and Health Minister in 2020, adding the Resources Ministry in 2021.
None of these, in the case of the finance and the health portfolio, ever were required to be used.
And he was fairly sure they were the only 3 secret portfolios he'd held.
So there are none others that I'm aware of.
But within 2 hours, the Ministry of Morrison's had grown by 2. The current PM revealing that in addition to health, finance and resources, Morrison had put himself in charge of Home Affairs and the Treasury, holding on to those secret ministries right through to election day.
There have been revelations of an extraordinary and unprecedented trashing of our democracy by the former Morrison government.
Health Minister Greg Hunt did know of the arrangement, and Keith Pitt found out when he had a key decision overruled. But Finance Minister Matthias Cormann, Treasurer/housemate Josh Frydenberg and Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews were all kept in the dark about their job share arrangements.
I think that the secrecy surrounding the swearing in of Scott Morrison to those portfolios is unacceptable.
This afternoon, Morrison apologised in a Facebook post.
For any offence to my colleagues, I apologise. I led an outstanding team who did an excellent job and provided me great service and loyalty as ministers.
The opposition leader deflecting attention back to the government.
It's time for cooler heads to prevail. The Prime Minister's come out of his holiday swinging, but there are bigger issues that, frankly, the families of Australia are dealing with at the moment.
But the anger's growing within coalition ranks.
This is the highest office any Australian can be elected to. It should be respected at all costs.
It would be appropriate, in my view, for Scott Morrison to resign and to leave Parliament.
Education Minister Jason Clare joins us now. Education Minister, any other portfolios we need to be aware of?
Not that I know of. I think I've just got one. It's big enough as it is.
Minister, Scott Morrison said that he was safeguarding, it was a safeguarding measure. That was his whole motivation for doing this. I mean, they were, when you think about it, they were unprecedented times at the beginning of the pandemic, akin to wartime. Does that justify it or at least excuse the actions?
No, I think that's a rubbish argument. You know, in the teeth of a pandemic, when people are being locked down and asked to get vaccinated, trust in government is critical. And when you find out afterwards that a big secret existed and that the Prime Minister didn't tell anybody that he actually was doing 5 jobs, that undermines trust in government. You know, the fact that they kept this secret tells you that they thought this was dodgy as buggery. The Australian people were kept in the dark. The Parliament was kept in the dark.
Minister, all that sounds bad, you know, secret, dodgy, undermining trust, but has any harm actually been done?
Well, democracy is all about, you know, not one person being in charge. You give power to different ministers. You know, we don't want to live in a dictatorship. Democracy is all about making sure that power is spread around. You know, I criticised Scott Morrison in the election campaign for continually saying it's not my job, it's not my job. Turns out I was wrong. Everything's his job.
But it wasn't a one-man government. He didn't remove ministers from their portfolios. He had added his name to them. It's not as though they weren't doing work or making decisions.
You can get yourself in a pretty awful situation where you've got 2 ministers responsible for the one portfolio that might make contradictory decisions.
Well, except that doesn't seem to be what actually happened, and that's the opposite of what you were arguing, which was that he was in charge of everything.
Well, he was in charge of 5 different portfolios. He intervened in an area
he was the
where
second minister in all bar one, I guess. That is the Prime Ministership. So he wasn't in charge of them. He wasn't the superior minister or...
No, but he was responsible for the acts in those areas, Waleed, and he intervened in resources because he wasn't confident that the minister he'd appointed to that job was going to make the decisions that he wanted made. You know, I think that's a problem there. Democracy relies on ministers being vested with powers and acting in the public interest. And there is this other issue here of why weren't people told? You know, it's the cover-up that kills you in politics, and this government's been responsible for more cover-ups than a dodgy tattoo parlour. We find out that Scott Morrison was responsible for all of these acts of parliament, all of these portfolio areas that we didn't know at the time.
So you mentioned resources. That seems to be the only decision he made with these powers. that he granted himself. This was on the PEP 11 gas project.
Yeah, it seems like that. That's right.
Yeah, and so that's where he came in and stopped that gas project going ahead. All things aside, was that a good decision?
Well, I think we made it clear before the election that we didn't support that project going ahead either. What seems to be the case is that his minister had a different view, so he decided to make himself the minister to stop it. Your government is seeking advice on the legality of all of this, which I find interesting. What rides on that advice? Well, I think it's important to seek advice from the Solicitor General, not just about whether it was a legal thing to do this, but what are the legal implications for matters that might be before the courts. We also need to know, did Scott Morrison breach the rules of the Parliament, mislead the Parliament by not telling the Australian Parliament that he was responsible for a number of acts of Parliament? Ministers can lose their job for misleading the Parliament. I'm very conscious of that. It seems like, for at least 12 months and in some cases 2 years, Scott Morrison had responsibilities before the Parliament and didn't tell anyone that he had them.
This seems to be mostly about Scott Morrison. He's currently keeping an extremely low profile as a backbencher, and it's not clear this really extends beyond him. This looks like a case of a bad apple. Is this a waste of political energy, given that he is now just a backbencher?
Well, look, Scott Morrison's yesterday's man. I expect that he won't be in the Parliament for much longer. But you've still got people sitting on the front bench of the Liberal Party who are complicit in this, who either knew this was happening and were too weak to stop it, or didn't have a clue what was going on and should have. You've got Peter Dutton that's defending Scott Morrison saying this is okay, and you've got Karen Andrews saying that he's betrayed the Australian people. So the Liberal Party have got a lot of soul-searching to do about what they did in government, and they need to learn some lessons about what running an orderly, mature government looks like. Did Peter Dutton say that what Scott Morrison did was okay, or did he just say that you shouldn't be focusing so much on it? Well, he certainly said the latter, Waleed. He's trying to distract attention from this because he finds himself in an awkward situation. He didn't know, apparently, that this was going on, or whether Scott Morrison might have been the Defence Minister at the same time he was as well. Yeah, but he hasn't waved it through, has he? David Littleproud criticised it. But he certainly hasn't gone as far as Karen Andrews has. Sure, but you said that he said it was okay, which is a slightly different thing. Did he actually say that? Well, I think Peter Dutton needs to be very, very clear here that what happened should not have happened. I haven't met an Australian yet who thinks it's a good idea for a Prime Minister to be sworn into 5 extra portfolios. And I think we should all agree that even if you think that's a good idea, you should tell the Australian people. Keeping it secret for 2 years is just crazy. As the Prime Minister said, it's weird, but also it undermines strength in our democracy.
Jason, Jesse's right in that Scott Morrison has kept a low profile on this. My spies on the ground tell me he may be in The Masked Singer right now. I've got him pegged as the popcorn, the thong and the rooster. Are you hearing similar things?
He could be the whole cast, mate. We just don't know.
I mean, the thong's been revealed, so if he was the thong, it's a really underground... really underground effort.
Great the case. Minister Jason Clare, thank you so much for your time.
Good on you. Thanks, everyone.